What if a cup could carry not only drink, but judgment? There are nights when silence presses harder than chains and seems to stretch out its hand through stone walls. There are nights when hearth smoke curls upward like a whispered prayer, and the cold air beyond the windows seals the world in December frost. On such a night in 1831 Virginia, a porcelain cup did not merely hold liquid, it held a question. Can justice be swallowed quietly, without alarm? Before we step inside this house, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe to join this community of witnesses. The cup gleams pale against the dark wood of the table. Firelight catches curves made smooth by years of service. Porcelain, fragile, foreign, yet embedded in the rhythm of plantation life, passed hand to hand not as luxury, but as a symbol of hierarchy. For some, it meant leisure. For others, obligation. Inside its walls, warmth gathered, and for those who saw deeper, menace could hide as well. On Christmas Eve, such vessels gleam at feasts, bowls brimming with roast, goblets reflecting candle flames, cups raised in ritual to mark plenty. Yet behind each celebration lies another memory, unmarked, uninvited, but present. The cup is not empty, even when clean. The ground remembers every hand that has trembled carrying it, every command barked over its rim. The hearth crackles, the air carries fat and oil. Yet in the corners, silence lingers, thick as cloth pressed over the mouth. Servants move with measured steps, their breathing stitched to rhythm, unseen but essential. They know that in such houses, nothing is truly idle. Not a glance, not a plate, not even the cups cooling on their trays. On that night, Josiah's gaze would rest on such an object. His stillness carried more than obedience. It was a memory arranged into silence, resolve wrapped so tight it gave no trace. The porcelain cup is where the story begins, not in the shout of revolt, not in weapons raised, but in the seeming innocence of offering a drink. And so the question lingers as frost presses to the window panes. Can justice move invisibly, as smoke moves, as breath moves, and find its way into the body unaware? The answer would be tasted, not spoken. The manor in Virginia did not stand proud. It crouched against the sky like something grown heavy from its own centuries. Winter pressed hard at its beams, swelling the timbers until doors protested when opened. Every hinge in that house had a voice. They creaked, not just to announce entrance, but to remind the walls who was master and who was not. This was a house measured by control. Every object bore witness to possession. Iron latches cold as stone, lamps whose oil climbed the wick with a tang that could not be mistaken. A ledger, great and ink-stained, waiting on the master's desk like a scripture rewritten to record value, not of faith, but of flesh. Here, the world of numbers attempted to contain human breath. Days, tasks, pounds of tobacco, pounds of cotton, bodies listed with their small economies. These ink lines hardened into facts, though those who lived beneath them knew such records bent truth. The ledger's pages seemed to absorb sorrow, though the script insisted on neatness. Doors swung and settled with complaint. Lamps guttered when wind passed through cracks in the frame. It was a house alive with noises that told on every movement. The enslaved knew them well. Which hinge betrayed a presence, which floorboard groaned too loudly. They learned to move not only with labor, but with listening. Silence was their language, doors and hinges their grammar. Outside, the ground had frozen into ruts where wagons had passed. The soil, once furrowed, now held the memory of harvest and the weight of boots. Snow dusted the edges, but it could not erase what was pressed deep. This ground remembered footsteps, commands shouted, punishments enacted under barren trees. It would remember what was coming too. Inside, warmth flickered, but not for all. Oil lamps sputtered in glass cylinders, their smoke riding low. The air smelled of iron from latches polished by daily grasp, of ink sharp from the ledger where words locked down property. These scents built an atmosphere as solid as the beams overhead, a cage masked as home. The rooms themselves seemed to listen. A whisper in the quarters might find its echo by morning in the master's tongue. Secrets did not stay hidden in houses of hinges. Yet sometimes soundlessness, discipline of quiet, the vow not to speak, could become stronger than any door latch. And it is in such a house that Josiah moved each day, invisible to those he served, but entirely alive to the textures around him. He knew scratches on wood, stains on ledger pages, the rhythm of boots climbing the stairs. He knew the voice of silence better than any hymn. This was no place of comfort, though fires burned. It was a place where oil lamps and ledgers outweighed flesh and bone, and where each creak announced more than footsteps. It foretold a reckoning gathering unseen. Josiah did not speak much within those walls. He had learned young that speech was a coin spent too freely, and silence was a wealth few could take away. His stillness was not emptiness. It was weight, a ledger kept inward, filled line after line with memory. His eyes carried what his hands could not express. When lamps burned low, their ember light brushed his skin, showing not youth nor age, but endurance. The quiet rhythm of his breath became a clock by which he measured the house. Work passed through him, folded cloth, pots stirred, wood lifted. Yet behind the tasks, his gaze recorded. Every cruelty, every uncontrolled word from the master entered his silent account. Stillness became his shield. Within stillness, he could watch without notice. He learned the names of winds passing the window, the count of footsteps before the master entered, the flicker of a candle when a storm approached. None of it meaningless, all of it joined into a system of remembrance. There was sorrow there, but not the kind that cried out. It lived in him like embers live in ash. Glowed unseen, carried anger without sound. He would fold cloth in measured squares, performing an act so ordinary yet so exact, it became ritual. Ritual became resolved. Josiah was expected to be unseen, to dissolve into walls, to serve as breath does, necessary but transparent. Yet in that stillness, he forged power. It was patient power, not hurried, like seeds buried in frozen ground, waiting for thaw. In his memory, he kept accounts the ledger in the master's study would never show. His was not ink and paper, but breath and sorrow. It was a ledger bound in silence. Detail by detail entered until it could no longer be contained. The master measured his authority not only in acres, but in acts. Cruelty was his ceremony. He carried punishments out with a precision that echoed scripture, staged before witnesses to remind all where power lodged. To him, order required performance. Tobacco smoke stained the walls of his chamber, curling from his mouth as he sat, surrounded by records. The quill scratched furiously as though the sound itself sealed dominion. Heavy boots marked his steps down the corridor, announcing terror before his voice arrived. His chair bore stains from years of posture, arms worn not by comfort, but by fist and grasp. He had made these gestures ritual, so familiar they became almost sacred to him. When he spoke, silence shattered. He snapped it as one snaps dry kindling. No stillness was allowed to outlast his presence. The enslaved understood this theater. They knew how each cruelty was intended to echo, how fear was a currency more valued than ink. They learned to bow not only heads, but voices, so as not to give the master cause for another display. Yet the ritual grew old, repeated too often, and repetition makes patterns. Patterns once seen can be rewritten. Josiah, who watched, who counted, kept those patterns folded within. He understood cruelty not as isolated, but as predictable. And what is predictable can be overturned. The master believed silence was mere absence. He did not recognize it as a force equal to his boots or his ink. Tobacco smoke masked his sight. He could not see that silence had already begun to erode the authority he performed. Before Christmas Eve, signs came like shadows. A lantern sputtered and slept, though its wick had just been trimmed, a guttering flame that no oil could steady. The dog by the kitchen door turned its head and would not touch bread offered to it. The ledger, ink still wet, smudged into unreadable shapes, though no hand brushed against it. In the quarters, murmurs passed like wind between loose boards, names spoken low, warnings cloaked in half-belief. Illness, some said. Storm, others whispered. Poison was a word too dangerous to name aloud, yet it trembled at the edges of breath. Rain tapped the shutters, cold and steady, as if counting time towards something inevitable. The dog's breath rose visible in the chill, restless with unease. Even those who did not know, who did not watch as Josiah watched, felt that something stirred beneath the feast preparations. No clarity, only unease. The household moved toward the holiday as if nothing shifted. But silence had thickened in the rooms. It pressed against windows, covered mouths, and made the smallest sound feel amplified. Every hinge squeal, every knock of cup on wood seemed foreign, portentous. Shadows lengthened, and with them, the sense that what was coming would enter, not with scream, but with hush. The body falters quietly at first, a cough dismissed as winter's touch, a stomach unsettled by rich food. Physicians of 1831 had little beyond speculation. Damp air, humors unbalanced, a draft from an unsealed window. Illness was guessed at like weather, never certain. Within the house, signs appeared one by one. A guest coughed through the candle-lit supper, pressing cloth to lips. A servant whispered of aching joints. Steps on the staircase grew uneven, unsettled footsteps that betrayed discomfort, but not yet alarm. The physician, summoned swiftly, strode with polished cane as though authority could be wielded in polished wood. He proclaimed theories: foul air from the swamp, spoiled meat, sleepless nights. His words filled the silence because silence demanded explanation. Yet his quill recorded nothing certain. Meanwhile, hours tilted into a new rhythm. Coughs came in waves, each measured by those who listened carefully in the quarters. Count the hours, count the names. Counting became compulsion, a way to map what was unseen. The physician's remedies were as crude as the guesses: blisters raised by heated cups, powders mixed in ignorance. None answered the deeper question. None touched the invisible hand that seemed to move through the house, writing affliction not with ink, but on flesh. Servants noted what the master ignored: the timing of symptoms, the way they spread not like air, but like intention. Some glances passed, but no words, for words could condemn. Yet, within silence, understanding grew. The candle near the sickbed guttered smoke, staining the air. Cloth pressed to fevered lips grew damp and heavy. Hours counted themselves by the coughs, not the clock. In other houses, illness would be misfortune. In this one, illness carried another shadow. suggestion of agency, yet the suggestion could never be proved. And that was its power. A decision such as Josiah's does not declare itself aloud. It gathers across days, across winters, until silence itself becomes command. And when the hour drew near, he did not reach for the blade or musket. Instead, he chose tokens, small, ordinary things stripped from their banality and threaded with meaning. On the table, cloth folded twice, edges squared against one another, became more than linen. It held his concentration, precise, unyielding. In his palm rested a sprig of herb, winter-hardened yet still aromatic, its scent ghosting the air each time his breath caught. From his pocket, a shard of hinge, rust biting the edge. Proof that even iron breaks. He held it as a reminder that doors yield, that nothing closed is everlasting. Outside, December clouds gathered in a silence heavier than speech. The storm whispered of inevitability in its rolling distance. Thunder did not need to sound for Josiah to hear it. The night was marked already. Christmas Eve, when watchfulness softened beneath wine and laughter. Within him, counting began, not of coin nor rations, but of breaths, each one bringing the feast closer. Each inhalation a mark against time, each exhalation a rehearsal of patience. 20 breaths before the call to serve, 10 before the wine was poured, 5 before the master lifted his cup. The tokens spoke their own language, folded cloth, herb sprig, shard of hinge. Together, they bound his silence into ritual. This was not improvisation, but coordination of memory, intention, and season. Reckoning was chosen not with fury, but with the stillness he had cultivated all his life. The storm pressed against windows, wind tracing cracks in frames. Inside, fire snapped at logs as servants aligned silverware, watching laughter swell in drawing rooms. The master did not suspect. Why would he? Doors still latched as they always had, accounts still inked, punishments still staged. His world was intact, yet its foundations had shifted already. For Josiah, time was no longer walls and hours. It was a threshold. Once crossed, no return, only echo. The storm, the feast, the objects in his hand, they marked the chosen night. Events would unfold with the inevitability of frost forming on glass, quiet, crystalline, beyond reversal. The table stretched long beneath oil lamps. Silver gleamed, polished so bright it reflected distorted faces, masters, guests, and shadows at the edges. Wax dripped in slow beads down candlesticks, gathering like time made tangible. The air was thick with roasted meat, grease rising, clinging to cloth, seeping into hair and skin. Conversation swelled with forced merriment, wine lifting voices higher, while just beyond the dining hall, a window stood unlatched, draft-stirring flame. The room bore warmth, yet trembled faintly under the pull of winter air. Josiah moved through it like smoke from the hearth, present yet disregarded. His hands poured wine into cups, each porcelain vessel catching glow from the fire. He counted them as he filled. 1, 2, 3. Each name silently tallied to each vessel, though no lip but his knew the reckoning being written. The master's cup stood waiting, porcelain pale, fine without flourish. In it pooled not only red liquid but something unsensed, invisible as the cold itself. Josiah's hand did not tremble. Stillness was his inheritance, and now his weapon. Around him, silver clinked, laughter strained, voices contested for cheer. But within the cup was another language, silence deeper than the storm outside. And into that silence, the feast would soon partake. The act unfolded without spectacle. Wine lifted, lips touched rim, swallow sunk. No one turned their head. No sound broke beyond the usual rhythm of feast, the faint clink of porcelain on wood, the shifting of bodies by fire. Josiah stood still. Each gesture before him entered his ledger of silence. He counted inwardly, not seconds, but names, each life marked with resolve. This was not fury. It was order, careful as tally marks on hidden parchment. Wax dripped again from candles, marking time as surely as breath. Hearth heat pressed heavy against the skin, almost suffocating, while cold pressed against the shutters. The windows held silence of their own, glass quivering faintly with storm outside. Each breath Josiah marked as both present and past. He carried within him memory of cruel ritual, tobacco smoke filling halls, boots grinding wooden steps. He now balanced those against this ritual inversion, silent, invisible, irreversible. The household ate on, unaware. Yet an unseen hand had already shifted the ledger. What was swallowed could not be undone. What was consumed became part of flesh, part of fate. Stillness endured. In that stillness, Josiah held dominion none could see, but all would one day feel. The aftermath did not rise in shrieks. It sank like water into soil. Neighbors spoke of illness after the feast, though not with certainty. Officials came, circled, left. No document bore accusation. The records did not name Josiah, nor any act. Silence was the institution's command. In the master's ledger, pages stood blank, as if nothing of note should be preserved. Ink blotches closed the record, black circles where names might have appeared. Absence itself became testimony. At the courthouse, rain fell steady on stone steps, echoing a toll unannounced. The bell in the church tower muffled against mist, refusing clarity. In the quarters, silence rooted deep. No story spoken openly, no claim made. Yet looks were shared, glances heavy with knowledge. For what words could not carry, memory did. The ground remembered even if the page refused. Suppression was necessary, for plantations thrived on performance of stability. A feast could end, deaths explained away, but the machinery of control could not admit fracture. And so silence was imposed, reinforced, passed down. What remained was not confession, not proof, only doubt thickening like smoke from hidden flames lingering in timbers long after fire cooled. Years folded into decades. Time weathered the manor's paint, rusted its hinges. The story of the Christmas feast did not vanish. It drifted. In one farmhouse attic, a cup was found, porcelain stained. Faintly, though whether by wine or by rumor, no one could prove. In another collection, a note appeared, unsigned, cryptic, only referencing the Feast of Affliction. An archivist copied it once, then struck it out, margin filled with erasure that itself carried suspicion. Oral tradition refused erasure. Around fire pits, whispered in quarters or at thresholds, Josiah's name endured. Not on ledgers, never in court records, but in breath. Children heard it in lullabies hushed by urgency. Adults repeated it when storms shook shutters. The voice of the tale was not fact. It was haunting. Objects emerged and decayed, brittle papers eaten by damp, hinges rusted in soil, handwriting fading though once firm. These artifacts did not declare truth, they suggested, and suggestion is its own kind of permanence. In such fragments, legend grew stronger than record. There is no verdict here, no archive to close the matter, no page to underline it with certainty. There is only silence remaining. Josiah's act, if it was, did not cry out for vengeance. It sat within quiet, within ritual, within the reckoning that silence can hold. The cup, once emptied, holds memory still. The hinge, once broken, rusts deeper, carrying time inside its fissures. The wind pushes through window cracks at night, reminding sleepers that justice can slip in unnoticed. Reckoning is not a spectacle. It is presence. It endures when boots no longer walk the stair, when ledgers rot into unreadability, when iron rusts back to earth. It endures in silence, pressing against those who inherit the story, whether they believe it fact or ghost. And so the question remains, who bears the weight? The master who drank, the witness who poured, the descendants who remember only fragments? Or is the weight carried by silence itself, enduring, unresolvable, yet unforgotten? The ground remembers, even when men refuse. The cup gleams faintly in imagination, half seen in cupboards or attics, refusing to empty its meaning. Doors creak, night winds whisper, silence presses. Reckoning breathes still.